Hi everyone, my name is Beth Wilson and welcome back to my video series, The Power of Storytelling. In each episode, I invite a guest to share stories that will help us understand discrimination and inequality in order that we all might learn and grow. I hope through the video series that you walk away inspired by some incredible people and feel equipped with some resources to help you lead your own transformational storytelling conversations. My guest today is a friend and former colleague, Pardeep Singh Gill. Pardeep is a CPA and an audit partner at KPMG in Canada in their technology, media, and telecommunications practice. Pardeep is based just outside Toronto and is passionate about making a difference in the workplace. He's an active mentor and mentee and is the head of the India network for KPMG's GTA office. He's also involved in a number of charities, including serving on a nonprofit board for an organization that is focused on women in technology. He sits on the board of a local multi-site hospital network, making a difference for a diverse catchment of residents who have traditionally been underserved by our provincial healthcare system. I met Pardeep way back in September 2004 when he joined KPMG out of university, and it's been a pure pleasure to see him develop into the inclusive, optimistic, and driven leader that he is today. Pardeep, thank you so much for joining me today and welcome.
Hi, Beth. It's a pleasure to be here with you today virtually. Thank you so much for having me.
Why don't we jump right in, Pardeep, and maybe I'll start us off with a personal question. So you're an incredibly busy professional, and you have a very young family. And 2020, and actually the first few months of 2021, been a really difficult year for many communities in Canada, whether that's COVID related or all the events leading up to the groundswell of anti-racism movements. So how has 2020 unfolded in your professional network and your community?
Yeah, I mean, so that's a fully loaded question.
Yes.
As with almost everyone in the client service profession or even outside the client service profession, 2020 and since the beginning of 2020 up until today has been a wildly different year. From a work perspective, from onboarding staff, virtually dealing with ailing family and friends while trying to manage your workload, it's been extremely tough. But there have also been positive stories with colleagues and friends having children, getting married, advancing in their own careers. So it's for me, just like most people, there have been a lot of ups and downs. I live in the region of Peel. COVID has consumed almost the entire year and into 2021. Whether it's helping friends navigate through their cases of COVID, volunteering on the local hospital board, or even just helping my kids cope with the constant school closures. So it's been a real challenging year, but I look at the positive side of things, and 2020 brought a lot of social movements and righteous causes to our workplaces, whether it was anti-Black racism, anti-Asian racism, or standing up against racism, period. Whether it's talking about the continued suffering of the indigenous communities or the farmer protests in India. So the good thing about 2020 and this year is it really has brought in some of these righteous causes to our workplace. And for that, I'm thankful.
Yeah, we've definitely experienced the same thing here at Denton's as well, Pardeep. The number of conversations we're having, the really difficult conversations that we're having, right, as people work their way through these issues from whatever their personal lived experience has been, including asking some really tough questions about how to be a better ally and what is a good ally. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that. Part of that, there's been certainly a lot of discussion, at least a lot of the discussions I've been having with my team members about better understanding microaggressions and the emotional tax that comes from, growing up and constantly internalizing, either overt racism or some of those more subtle slights. So when you think back about your own career to date, how did those impact you coming through KPMG or even growing up? Did you change your behavior as a result? And I'm wondering if you have a couple stories maybe that you could share with us in terms of how you've personally dealt with that.
Yeah, sure, definitely. I'm sure all of us have stories. That being a Sikh, I come from a community that's faced persecution, racism, and discrimination since our existence. It's something that, it's part of our culture, and we've been taught about it growing up and how to stand up against it. So, so although I've seen different acts of racism, as I go through the workforce and discuss with my family and friends, I think my attitude or behavior towards it, or my dealings towards it, haven't changed much because of my upbringing, and I was always taught to stand up against it. So, whether that's proving somebody wrong by showing that I'm capable of doing something that they didn't believe I could do, or whether that's, matching hate with love, that's sort of my underlying base that I approach everything with. And I try to make sure, if you approach it with that level of optimism, it has you can have a good result, but you're true to yourself that way. So I can definitely share some examples of microaggressions, Beth, that didn't necessarily unnerve me, but I'd like to share them because it can show others how small comments might affect people and bring people down, even though you might not mean it in a negative way. One story that I can think of was a colleague of mine and I were walking into a meeting for one of our clients where we were meeting potential investors for them. Walking into that meeting, it was a very important meeting. The investors wanted to meet with the auditors and understand the work that we did. The colleague of mine was extremely nervous, worried about the meeting. It's about a 2-3 hour meeting that was scheduled. There were investors coming in from Silicon Valley. We met with them. We had probably about a 30-minute meeting. It was supposed to be a 2-3 hour meeting. Hit it off really well, spoke about the file, just connected with each other. And 30 minutes later, the investor said, we're satisfied with what we need. Thank you so much for your professionalism. Love your personalities, and we're done. And so I was really happy with that. And mind you, my colleague didn't say a word at the meeting other than sort of hello and bye. And we got out of the meeting, and he looked at me and he said, we left the meeting, obviously went to our room to debrief, and he said, wow, you were amazing in there. You talked as if you were white. And I looked at him as if, what does that mean? I didn't react. I was kind of taken aback. And he was a white fellow, and he said, I can't believe you related to those guys. You had the meeting out of the palm of your hand. It was phenomenal sort of watching you. I almost thought you were white. And, I asked him what he meant by that. And he continued, he went to clarify that he didn't think, people of color could relate with big shot Silicon Valley investors. I explained to him that the comment could be offensive. This is a good friend of mine. I explained to him that comment could be extremely offensive to some people, but we were friends and we talked about it. And the lesson there for him was, you had these big shot investors coming down. They didn't care who was on the other side. They didn't care how I looked. They were white as well, and they didn't care how I looked. They just wanted to know what the quality of the work was, what the quality of the file was. And so for him, that was really, he's a great fella, and he really regretted making that comment, but it was a learning for him that sometimes we can make comments that we don't mean to be negative, but they can really belittle somebody on the other side. So that's certainly one example, Beth. But don't get me wrong. It's not just the microaggressions that people face and that they struggle with. It's a blatant acts of racism as well. And Beth, I have a second example as well. Me as a partner, I'm fairly confident in the work I do. I'm confident in my abilities, but still sometimes when I'm meeting a new client or meeting somebody new for the first time, I might not turn on my camera when we have video calls because I'd rather the person judge me for the content of our discussions than the way I look. And that's something that I have to work on. And, that's something that I need to, build on my confidence. But it goes to show you that, even microaggressions can have an impact on somebody at a senior level. And you can imagine the type of impact it has on them, on folks who are a little bit more junior. And don't get me wrong, it's Beth, I know there's been a lot of focus on microaggressions, but there's also still acts of blatant racism that we face today. I remember when, I started my career, people made very insulting comments to me. One, Sikhs, we faced persecution, attempted genocide in the 70s and 80s in India. And one person made a comment to me saying, I wish India had finished you guys off back then. And I realized I could have reacted in a very negative way at that time, but that wouldn't have benefited anyone. My approach, as I mentioned before, has always been to be positive. And I still talk to this person to this day, and he regrets it, and he's changed his ways. But as much as we focus on microaggressions, we can't forget that some people still face blatant racism.
Right. And I think, Pardeep, it's hard to open up the paper. It's hard to open up the newspaper today and forget that, right? Because it's so disappointing to me that still in Canada, in our society, there are so many acts of pure hate, which I would put on a different end of the continuum from some of the microaggressions. Also disappointing to think that for somebody as accomplished and confident as you are, that you still feel that way sometimes about being judged by how you look first, as opposed to content. And I wanted to go back to your first example, because I thought it was really powerful for our viewers in terms of how you took the time to turn that moment into a teaching moment, right? A teachable moment for a colleague that you cared enough about to have that conversation. And I think that's really courageous to do that, Pardeep. And I think that's an important thing for all of us to do, whether we're on the receiving end of that situation, or for example, if I had been present and overheard the comment or observed it as an ally, to kind of hit the pause button in the moment and give the feedback and help people learn and progress.
Yeah, no, I appreciate those comments, Beth. I certainly understand where you're coming from. My approach has always been that, optimism breeds optimism, hate breeds hate, love breeds love. So if I want to get something positive out of somebody, I need to approach it with a positive mindset. Yeah.
And so just building on that then, Pardeep, this momentum is incredible. And I know there have been some people who are skeptical to say, oh, it's just a moment, it'll pass and people will forget. I don't think so. I feel like there's a lot of traction from the momentum we've seen, after the horrific events in 2020. What's your thought? Why is it so important to build on that momentum? And then how have you been personally trying to build on that momentum at KPMG?
Yeah, I think it's important to build on that momentum, Beth, because it took us so many years to capture this moment, to capture this momentum. It took so many deaths. It took so many wrongdoings. It took so many videos on cell phones to be uploaded to social media for us to finally have this movement at this level. And we can't let that opportunity go to waste. I said before on this call that I feel 2020 has allowed these movements to make their way to our offices. In years past, many people would have been shy to discuss these, but now we're not. Now we're not shy to discuss these. We're very openly discussing these items. I've had people who I never have imagined to have open discussions about racism with me have those discussions. I think with the new generation of co-workers coming into the work stream who look at things completely differently than we do, I think we need to learn from them, and we need to take advantage of this situation that we have. And I think COVID has really opened up everyone's eyes to say, what really is important. Life is so fragile. Is it really worth living with all this hate? Mm-hmm. So I think that's part of the reason why we need to take advantage of this now. And also there's so much support that our workplaces are giving us as well, right? So if I look at KPMG, it's done an absolutely phenomenal job, as I know it has had Dentons and so many other firms, at advancing the movement. KPMG has supported the cause in so many ways at all levels of the firm, at the board level, executive level, through interprofessional networks, and even externally. I think we have this opportunity where workplaces are letting us come in and have these discussions, and they're embracing them. And I think that's why it's also so important. It's not just individuals who are moving it forward now, it's entities and organizations and corporations. For me personally, Beth, I think the biggest contribution that that I've made, and the biggest contribution that people have made for me, is just having one-on-one conversations. The firms have opened up so many paths and done so much, but at the end of the day, if we don't take the opportunity to take advantage of those paths and have those one-on-one conversations, this could all go to the wayside. Like, I can't count the number of times where staff have pulled me aside and said, I felt like I was discriminated against, or I just feel personally, I feel like I can't succeed because of the way I look, or because I can't relate with my bosses. And I have those conversations all the time with minorities, and those go a long way. And I always tell them, you can either be part of the problem or you can be part of the solution. And if you want to be part of the solution, you can't pack your bag and run away, because you'll face a similar problem somewhere else, unfortunately. So for me, it's been having those conversations with young professionals and minorities, but also with Caucasian people, right? Like, you can't look at somebody and say, okay, I'm only having these discussions with this type of people. It's having these conversations with everybody, all people of all shapes and forms.
I remember in our conversation, you saying to me, don't wait for the white person to leave the room before you have the conversation,
Yeah.
right? They need to be part of the discussion. Well, Pardeep, I know because I know you well from your earlier years too, how important those one-on-one conversations were for you when you were a younger professional. So I'm not at all surprised to hear that that's how you are personally advancing things at KPMG. And I remember our many discussions, of course, when you were earlier in your career, and I was a younger partner, and we were sitting down and doing your performance reviews, and those career discussions, which I always enjoyed, because you're such a talented professional and you always came super prepared for those discussions, and your potential was so obvious to me. But I'll always remember that meeting we had where we were talking about aspiration to be a partner. And I remember you saying very bluntly to me, Beth, the problem is when I look ahead and into the partnership, there is nobody that looks like me. And I remember that to this day. And I'm curious, Pardeep, how did that impact you at that stage of your career as an aspiring professional? Like, what did it feel like to be the only, right, in the pipeline and not see yourself represented? And then how did you overcome it? Because here you are, incredibly accomplished, successful partner. So,
well, thank you for the kind words, first, Beth. And in short, it's because of people like you who took me under their wing. And we need that mentorship and allyship. But there's definitely something different and something challenging and difficult about being the only in the pipeline, especially 10 or 15 years ago, when inclusion and diversity was not as prominent in our workplace as it is now. And to be honest, what really helped me is as a Sikh, I come from a background, a culture, and an upbringing that embraces challenges. Historically, part of the reason why we wear a turban is so that we can stand out in a crowd, and somebody who needs assistance can easily approach us and find us. So being the only person with a turban at the firm at that time was definitely a challenge, but it was one that I welcomed. I viewed it as an opportunity to knock down doors for others who might come behind me. Definitely, there's something daunting about that. But you have to work hard to make sure that you carve a path for those that those are yet to come. And also, KPMG gave me an opportunity. They gave me a great opportunity to work for this great firm and to become a partner at that firm. So I'd be silly to pass up on that opportunity. And what motivates me really is it comes from my personal life. I look at my parents, and they came to this country in the 70s, and they faced a lot of racism. And they worked in factories, so I could work in an office. And so I find a bit of sense of responsibility to climb that corporate ladder, so that the people who come behind me can be on executive teams, be CEOs, and don't feel like they have to break barriers. So that was a significant motivation for me, Beth, as to how I face the struggles of being the only. But at the same time, it was being taken under the wing of so many people at KPMG. I remember one of the first meetings I had at KPMG as a summer intern I had the opportunity to speak with our CEO at the time, Bill McKinnon. And he said, yeah, you know Bill, Bill well. He said one of the legacies that he wants to leave at KPMG is making it a more diverse workspace, diverse at the junior levels, but also at the board level, the executives. He wants to make it diverse. And I remember when Bill used to come to our office in North York, and you knew when Bill was there. Everybody knew when Bill was there, and he would make it a point to come to my office to shake my hand and ask how I was doing. And to this day, if he calls me on a work-related matter, if we're working together, and I'll spend an hour chatting with him about my career, and he doesn't have to do that, and he probably doesn't even know that he made that difference in my career, but it goes a long way. I look at my mentors in my career, whether it was yourself, Brendan Marr, Mary Lou Marr, Paul Simon, these people, they're all people, not people of color. Right, so it's that opportunity to work together with people who honestly care and want to make a difference in the world that has me sort of shooting for the stars and trying to advance and leave a trail for the folks behind me.
And so Pradeep, I mean that's wonderful, and look, Bill was an incredible sponsor for me as a young female professional in the firm at the time. So when you're alone in that audit room, just you with the team, and the questions start to come out, what do you tell the young person who is not maybe in as positive a headspace as you are, who's struggling with not seeing many ahead in the ranks that look like them, or dealing with racism? What words of advice are you giving our next generation?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. First of all, I guess I'm surprised and not surprised that the young generation is still asking me the questions that I was asking of the people who were senior to me. So first, I always tell them not to fall into the trap of thinking all white people are against them, because I hate to say it, but some people come to the conversation with that with that approach, and that's just not true, right? That's just not true. But in these conversations, I always encourage them to do two things, and the first is to always put your best foot forward. I say, be true to yourself. If you're at a workplace, try your hardest, learn whatever you can, and do your best to succeed. And be your natural self. And the career progression, it'll come. And the second thing that I tell them is to have conversations. I say career progression is not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. You need to have conversations with your seniors, and you need to push the dial. If you feel uncomfortable and something is not right with you, you need to have that conversation, because you could make a difference in the world, and maybe there is, and you can make a difference in your workplace, and maybe there is something that's going on there that you can contribute to making better. So my advice is always, no matter where you are, no matter what challenges you're facing, you owe it to yourself to work as hard as you can and to accomplish what you can, despite what others might throw your way. I always say it's better to overcome an obstacle than to run away from it and leave it for somebody else. And I think that resonates with people, because all of us are open to breaking down barriers, and I think that resonates with people.
Those are great words of advice for everybody, Pardeep. It's better to break down an obstacle than run away and leave it for someone else. That's the gem that I'm taking away with me, amongst others, from this call. You named off a number of your mentors who would also be considered allies, I think. What's the best way to be an ally, or how can people be better allies? Any advice for our viewers?
I think the best advice I have for somebody to be an ally is, when you want to be an ally, it's because you care. It's because you care about people. It's because you care about the struggles and anxieties that they might be facing. But to be an ally, you have to take that feeling of caring and turn it into actions. And it's just doing something. And when people come to me and say, "Hey, Pardeep, I want to be an ally, but I don't know how to. I don't want to offend somebody." And people often come to me and say, I have a question about your turban, but I don't want to offend you." Right? They always say that. And one analogy that I give people always that kind of resonates with a lot of folks is, because we live in this diverse community in Canada, a lot of us have been invited to other people's places of worship. where, you know, it's not our own place of worship. And just think about when you have gone to that other place of worship, the church or gurdwara, mosque, whatever it is, you walk in and you feel a little bit out of place. You feel a little bit uncomfortable. You don't know if you're doing the right thing. You don't know if you're offending somebody. You don't know if somebody's going to be upset with you. And then, you know, hopefully most of the times you get approached by somebody from the family that invited you, and they say, look, we know you're not part of this religious group. We know you have no clue what you're doing here, but we're going to take you under our wing and we're going to show you the way so you don't feel like you're offending anybody, but that you also feel welcome. And when you have that person that comes up to you and makes you feel comfortable like that, you feel welcome in that place, and your tensions and your stress come down. And so I always say to somebody who wants to be an ally, but is afraid, I say, think about when you're in that awkward situation, whether it's, you know, at a different place of worship, or whether it's at a new workplace, or whether it's just your kid's friend's birthday party and you don't know any of the other parents. Think about that situation. That's how many minorities feel when they're in the workplace and they don't feel welcome, or they don't feel wanted, or they feel a little bit uncomfortable. And that's usually when you have those microaggressions and not the blatant racism. And it would mean the world for them, for somebody to come up and say, hey, I'm going to take you under my wing. And you make mistakes, but it's better to make mistakes than not be an ally at all.
Wow, it's a really powerful analogy, Pardeep. Thank you for that. We're getting close to the end of our time, and one of the things that I like to try to do in these videos is leave people with resources, whether that's a book or a website or something to listen to that you would recommend. So do you have any recommendations for our viewers?
Yeah, definitely. I'm very keen on learning about people's backgrounds and histories that are not like mine. So one podcast I recently started listening to was the New York Times podcast called 1619. And it's about the history of American slavery and Africans as slaves in America. And it's phenomenal. It's just it really opens up your eyes to some things that you know, you didn't realize, and some of the things that we can relate to from history today.
Oh, that's a great recommendation, considering you and I are having this conversation in June, and Juneteenth just passed. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. As always, it's just it's such a pleasure speaking with you, Pardeep, and you're so inspirational in terms of the way you really live your values through everything that you do, and it came through so clearly today in our conversation. And I want to thank you for sharing so much of that at a fairly intimate level in terms of your experiences with our viewers. And I know it's going to be really impactful. So thank you very much. And I want to wish you and your family a safe, healthy, and happy summer. And it was great to have you on.
Thank you so much, Beth. Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.